On August 4th, we woke up super early and started driving. We drove to a little town in Ontario called Beardmore. I have family there, but there isn't a heck of a lot else. Well, besides that giant snowman. After we left Beardmore, we headed to North Bay, and then after that we went to Ottawa. I'd been to Ottawa before and done the whole tour of the Parliament buildings, so it wasn't a big deal, just another stop along the way. The next day we headed to Quebec City, where we spent the afternoon wandering old Quebec. There were all sorts of cool old buildings, as well as street performers, and neat little shops. I fell in love with it. The next day it was more driving. We stopped in Harttown to drive through the world's longest covered bridge, and then it was back on the road, destination Halifax. We spent a few days in Halifax visiting my aunt and uncle. It was so humid there, but for the most part we had nice weather. We went to a couple of museums and saw the Blue Nose too, which was under repairs, so her sails weren't up. We also went to this place called Peggy's Cove, where they have this lighthouse and all these rocks that you can climb on. I think this was my favorite place in Halifax. You had to be really careful though, because waves are constantly crashing on the rocks, and if you step too close, you can be knocked over. There was one point when I was running around, and just as I finished crossing a giant area, this huge wave crashed up, just where I'd been walking. I probably would have been swept off of my feet, and probably quite hurt. Talk about a close call. We also saw this lighthouse on what they called Dead Man's Island. Some story about if you were part of the Navy and you jumped ship and they caught you, they'd kill you and then hang your body over there as a warning to other sailors. Made me kind of think of Pirates of the Caribbean. After we left Halifax, we headed to Cape Breton Island, where we stayed in Sydney. We went to Fort Louisbourg one day, a French fort that the English captured from them twice, in the exact same way. I guess they never learned. Everything was set up for period, or when the French were in control of the fort, and they had things like cannon firings and gun shootings. It was pretty cool. The next day was off to PEI via the Cabot Trail. We stopped a few times along the way to do a couple of hikes, including a few spectacular views. After a long day, we finally were in Charlottetown. In PEI, we did some Anne of Green Gables stuff, as well as went to this ice cream factory called Cows, and had ice cream for breakfast. Yum. They're apparently Canada's best ice cream, but I'm still pretty partial to my BDI. It was then off of the island over the Confederation Bridge, the world's longest bridge. It took us 11 whole minutes to drive across it, which is crazy. We headed to the Hopewell Rocks at the Bay of Fundy, where they have the world's largest tides. Most of the difference in the tides is about 4 feet, but here it's over 40. It was pretty cool to see all the rocks completely underwater and then come back and be able to walk where only a few hours before was the bottom of the ocean. We then headed to the States and then came back up to Toronto so we could visit my aunt and uncle and cousins, as well as go to Canada's Wonderland and go on Canada's largest roller coaster, Leviathan. It was so awesome. After a couple of days of visiting, it was back to the States and then more driving until we were all the way home. I knew I was going to be homesick while I was away. 3 weeks is a very long time after all. But there was also something freeing about the experience. For once, I was the one who wasn't saying to everyone, "Come home soon," but rather I was the one out there exploring new and exciting places and seeing things entirely different than anything I'd ever seen before. Although the trip wasn't perfect, and we did fight a fair bit, I'm really glad I went on it. Almost as glad as I am to be back home.